Alright, I want to talk about last Monday's WWE Draft for a minute here. For me, I thought it actually turned out a lot better than the previous drafts. A lot of the roster changes felt like they actually meant something and could maybe shake up the status quo of the company somewhat. Of course, ECW is made to look even more insignificant than it was before, but that shouldn't really come as a surprise to any of us by now. They lose their top star in CM Punk, then they lose Kane. Well, Kane's no big loss in my opinion, but he is the ECW champion, and apparently he's going to keep the belt. I don't know why, since Bobby Lashley was stripped of it when he got drafted to Raw last year. I was really surprised to see Triple H get drafted to SmackDown. I didn't think that would ever happen. Of course, he was drafted to SmackDown once before, if you recall, and he managed to get out of it then, so I'm kind of skeptical if this is going to stick. Of course, the guy I really felt sorry for in the whole thing was Matt Hardy. I mean, Matt was doing pretty well for himself on SmackDown as the U.S. champion, and now he gets drafted to the C-Show. And C-Show is being pretty generous at this point. I mean, I don't think you can even call ECW the C-Show anymore. I mean, it's more like the Q-Show these days. I mean, it's basically just a WWE developmental system with a TV deal, and that's it. Of course, I stand by what I said before about this whole thing. I mean, I still think the idea of a draft lottery is totally pointless when you don't bother to enforce the brand extension. I mean, why make such a big deal out of it when you've got guys jumping from brand to brand every week anyway? It makes no sense. And, of course, that's for the angle that closed the show, with the set collapsing on Vince McMahon. I think it was a pretty funny way to end the $1 million giveaway, when they could have just said, this will be the last week we're giving away free money, and then kept the spotlight on the draft picks, which I thought was the whole point of the show in the first place. As it is, I mean, it totally took the focus off the draft and put it on Vince McMahon instead, which is unfortunate, seeing as how a lot of the draft picks were actually kind of newsworthy and could potentially shake things up, as Vince is so fond of saying. And I did think it was in kind of poor taste for them to do a stunt like this just 2 weeks after a TNA employee literally died from a really similar accident. But, poor taste and the WWE kind of go hand in hand these days. I mean, they give Ric Flair such an amazing and classy send-off, and then they revert to form and do something like this. And I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm really not. And, the other thing I wanted to talk about in this video, I've had a couple of requests in the last few days for a video about my favorite WWE wrestlers. And I was going to tag my Raw thoughts onto the front of the Impact review for this week, as I usually do, but this thing came along, so I figured, what the hell, I'll just put these two things together. Contrary to popular belief, I don't really hate on the WWE wrestlers. I know most of their matches suck these days, but that's not really their fault, at least not totally. I mean, they're not supposed to have fast-paced matches anymore because they've basically been ordered by the higher-ups to slow things down. And while I really hate that, I do still like a lot of the wrestlers themselves. For example, one of my favorite wrestlers of this era, bar none, is Edge. I've been an Edge head for years. From a very early point, you could tell this guy was going to be a star. He just had something. When Edge and Christian and the Hardys and the Dudleys were feuding, and everyone was saying how Jeff Hardy was going to be the big breakout star of this group, I was like, nope, it's going to be Edge. Just wait and see. And he's what, like a 5-time world champion now? Anyway, in a company full of misused talent, I think Edge really stands out from the pack as a guy that the WWE has actually done really well with. He's become one of the best heels in the business, in my opinion. Which is not to say I love everything they've done with him. I mean, the Vicky Guerrero thing just creeps me out, and I still think it's absolute bullshit that he couldn't go over The Undertaker in a TLC match unless he had a 5-on-1 advantage. I mean, seriously, if there was one match The Undertaker could have put over Edge cleanly in, it was TLC. Because that's Edge's match. That's the match he made famous. And I said this before on here in comments and whatnot, but leave it to The Undertaker to put over Edge and then bury him at the same time. And two other guys I think are great, London and Kendrick. I think both these guys are amazing, but unlike Edge, I think WWE is totally pissed all over them. This is the best tag team WWE has, and what are they doing with them? Nothing. They haven't done a thing since they came to Raw. They've just been job fodder for bigger guys, basically. And I heard Brian Kendrick was drafted to SmackDown during the week, so that's the end of that, I guess. WWE breaks up their best tag team off camera with no fanfare. What a waste. Speaking of wasted talent, what is WWE doing with CM Punk? I know he was a last-minute substitute for Jeff Hardy to win Money in the Bank, but since he won that thing, they have gone out of their way to make him look like a glorified jobber who got lucky one time. I mean, why? What is the point when he's carrying around a guaranteed world title shot? I mean, Punk is one of these guys that WWE should be getting behind. He's so talented, and what are they doing with him? Please explain to me why he didn't win King of the Ring. Right now, he's the Money in the Bank winner with no credibility at all. Winning King of the Ring would have given him the credibility he needed to look like a real contender, but instead of doing that, they just had Regal win King of the Ring. Wow, that worked out great, didn't it? Then we have Matt Sydal. I think Matt Sydal is absolutely incredible. When WSX went under, I was just hoping so hard that TNA would sign him because I knew that if WWE got a hold of him first, that he would just go to waste. And guess what? He is. They kept him off TV for months before he debuted. Then he puts in some impressive performances, he gets a little momentum going, and then he gets squashed by a bland generic big man in Mike Knox. What is the point of that? I mean, it looks to be the end of Matt Sydal's push already, and he might not even get another one because he's a cruiserweight, and Vince doesn't think cruiserweights are worth that much, no matter how good they are. And that's too bad, because a wrestler the caliber of Matt Sydal doesn't come along every day, and to see him get held back just because he's not 6'5", 280, it doesn't make sense to me. And another thing that doesn't make sense to me is the treatment of Shelton Benjamin. Why hasn't this guy gotten pushed? Do any of you understand this? And don't give me some bullshit excuse about how he's being held back because he can't get good promos or he's not charismatic enough. When Sheldon got moved to Raw his first night, when they put him in the ring with Triple H, he was so over as a babyface it wasn't even funny. And he didn't even have to say a word. If WWE had just followed through with his push, they could have created a huge new star. But instead, he had a pretty forgettable run with the IC title, and then he was sent to languish in ECW for months. And no offense to guys like Matt Hardy, but there is no way that being moved to ECW means that your career is on the right track. I mean, look at how ECW got treated during the draft. Beyond the fact that they got screwed over on draft picks and then got stuck with Mark Henry and Hornswoggle during the week, they got treated like jobbers in the matches. Kofi Kingston, another super talented guy, by the way, is getting a healthy push on Tuesday nights. He was undefeated for a couple months, I think. And the crowd's starting to get behind him, and what happens? He gets squashed by Bradshaw, a Raw guy, in like 2 minutes. Because he's from ECW. And it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is, how much talent you have. As far as the WWE is concerned, if you're on ECW, it means you suck.